Good evening and welcome to This Week in Joe's Basement.
I'm Anton, and this is Joe's Basement.
I'm Dan, and this is Joe's Basement. Got a laugh, can you tell? I'm Mark, and this is Joe's Basement. This week on Joe's Basement...
What we're going to do this week is a little experiment wherein we examine the process of storytelling. What we're going to do is we're going to have one person in our Crack Joe's Basement storytelling team is going to tell a story, okay? A story in the third person.
First one person tells it, second person hears it and repeats it.
Then the third person tells it while the fourth person listens, kind of like the old children's game of telephone, only a little more interesting because we're all adults.
So the story is going to go down 3 generations here, as we video buffs like to say, and it's going to get changed, you know, because people are basically like that. They change things, and so what we're going to see is that's going to be interesting is to watch how this story evolves through 3 series of retellings. And well, what we decided to spice things up by doing is give it a time limit to make sure that it makes good, entertaining television. And so we got this big darkroom timer, which some of you may remember from episode number 1. Set to, and we tried it 2 ways, the time limit. First we set it to 3 minutes, give everybody 3 minutes. We tried it again, where we gave the first person as long as he needed, and the next person I think got 4 minutes, and then 3, and then 2. Just to apply a little pressure to the performers to make sure they don't get too boring. So that's what we're going to do. It's storytelling and story distortion this week in Joe's Basement. I really like the sweet things, but these raisins are pretty gross. And they contain less than 2% of the USRDA of these nutrients.
These contain less than 2% of the USRDA of some things. You know, I really like these sweet things, but
This shit just, frankly, doesn't work.
once upon a time, there was a boy named Jack, and he was lazy. He was lazy as shit. He never did anything. He sat around the house all day, watched television, game shows, and didn't have a job, and basically mooshed off of his mother. One day his mother told him, "You lazy bum, get out there and get a job." So he got up, left the house, went walking around, didn't really do much, but he walked across the stream and he looked down and he saw this coin in it. There was a coin lying in the water. So he picked it up, said, "Oh, that's nice, valuable thing, I just found it," and was very pleased with himself and thought his mother would be happy. He came home not empty-handed. So he stuffed it in his pocket, ran home, and he got home, and it wasn't there. He was all embarrassed. There was a big hole in his pocket, and it had fallen out. And his mother said, "You bum, you idiot, you should have carried it in your hand." And he said, "Oh, well, you know, next time I'll do that." So next day he goes out trying to earn some living, and he goes and does some manual labor for a dairy farmer. And the dairy farmer gives him a stick of butter for his work. And he says, "I know this time I'll carry it in my hand." And he carries it home in his hand, and of course it melts and gets all mushy, and by the time he gets home it's worthless and not edible. And his mother says, "You bum, you idiot, you should have put it on your head." And he says, "I'll do so next time." Okay. So next day he goes out, does some labor, and he works for some guy who raises chickens, and he gets an egg and tries to balance it on his head and gets a little way, but eventually it falls and breaks, and he comes home with nothing, and his mother says, "You idiot, you should have put it in a basket." And so he says, "I'll do so next time." So he goes out and works for a while, and he does something else. I got to figure out how I'm going to get this around to the ending. He says he goes out and works all day and gets a big sack of potatoes from some farmer. And he tries to put it in a basket to carry it home, but he can't fit it into a basket. And so he really tries to cram all the potatoes in, but they fall out gradually as he gets home. By the time he's home, he only has 1 or 2 left. And his mother says, "You idiot, you should have put it on your back." So he says, I'll do so next time. Next day, he goes out, works really hard, somebody gives him a donkey. And he tries to carry the donkey on his back. He goes to all this trouble really trying to strap the thing on so that he can actually move around carrying the donkey. Okay, and the donkey doesn't like this idea. Now, it so happened that in this kingdom there was a princess, all right? And she'd never laughed in her whole life. She was crazy. And her father didn't like this. So, he said, anybody who makes my daughter laugh, okay, you can have whatever you want. You can have my daughter. You can boink her if you want. And Jack doesn't know about this, but he's walking through town trying to carry a donkey on his back, and he looks really ridiculous. And the princess sees this and cracks up, and she thinks that's hysterical. So and the king is so happy that he gives the princess to Lazy Jack and all the money he wants, and they sit around a nice house with his mother, and they even get the same bedroom, which I don't enjoy. And they live happily ever after until the old lady dies, and they're sort of unhappy, but they're still okay. You know, they spend their afternoons on the yacht. And that's the end.
Okay, this is the story of Lazy Tom. Though it's not really about a person who's lazy, it's about a person who's not particularly bright. It's sort of offensive in a way, in as much as it makes fun of someone with a smaller intellect than supposedly the hero or teller of the tale has. Alright, so Lazy Tom, let's call him Unfortunate Tom. Unfortunate Tom has a mother who is a complete bitch, quite frankly, and she thinks that he never accomplishes anything, and she constantly tells him so. One day he's walking along and he sees this coin on the ground, and he picks up the coin and he says, Mommy's gonna like this because I got this coin. And so he puts it in his pocket and he walks home and he says, look, Mommy, I got this coin, and he reaches into his pocket and there's a hole in his pocket and his coin is gone. She says, you idiot, you should have held it in your hand. Okay? Bitch. Alright, ingrate. So, the next day, Tom goes out and he finds an egg. You know, he's messing with the chickens and he finds an egg. Actually, I think he's working for someone, and for some reason he's given an egg. And, I'm sorry, it's butter. He's working for a dairy farmer and it's butter, you know, hand. So he's holding it in his hand when he comes home because his mother told him that. And of course, when he gets there, it's molten, right? It's dripping butter. No good, right? So she says, you idiot, you should have put it on your head, alright? So he goes and he works for a chicken farmer the next day, and the chicken farmer gives him an egg, and so of course he puts it on his head, and of course it rolls off, and it breaks, and she says, you idiot! I hate this woman. I'd love to beat the shit out of her, just like the goats in the previous story, which you may or may not have seen. Anyway, so she says you should have put it in the basket, whatever. So the next day he goes out and he goes to the store and he buys potatoes for his mother, and he tries to put them in the basket, but they won't fit. So what he does is he crams them in and they all turn to mush, you know, when he crams them into the basket. And when he gets home she says, you stupid son of a gun, because she's the bitch who he'd be the son of the bitch of if she called him that, so she doesn't. You should have put it on your back. Alright, so the next day he's going and he finds a donkey, and it wants to go home with him. I'm a donkey, I want to go home with you. So he tries to put the donkey on his back. So he's carrying the donkey on his back. Well, it just so happens that the king of this country has a daughter who's never laughed in her life. Okay, so the princess has never laughed, and the king says, well, anyone who makes this girl laugh can marry her. I'll give half my kingdom to anyone who makes this woman laugh. Assuming, of course, that some young man will make her laugh, as these stories tend to do. Anyway, so she sees Lazy Tom, Stupid Tom, Unfortunate Tom carrying this donkey, and she goes, ha! 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 Right, of course, because it's the funniest thing she's ever seen in her life. A woman with limited imagination.
So, this is the story of Foolish Tom, or Ignorant Tom, which is designed to offend the listener, or offend somebody. I forget what he said. So it starts out, there's this Tom guy who's foolishly ignorant, or ignorantly foolish, or, oh, he's lazy too. There's all these things. And he's got a mother who's a bitch. And so his mother sends him out to get some coins. And he finds these coins, and he puts them in his pocket, and he goes home, and he says, look, Ma, I got this coin, but he's really got a hole in his pocket, so there's no coin. So she says, you idiot, you should have held it in your hand. So next day he goes out looking for eggs and gets butter. I didn't quite get this part. So he puts the butter in his hand, and it gets all squishy, and his mother says, you idiot, you should have put it on your head. So he goes out, and the next day he finds the eggs, and he puts them on his head, and they roll off, and they break. So his mother says, "You idiot, you should have put them in a basket." So the next day, I really forget what, I think it was kittens, which is pretty gross. I hope it wasn't kittens, but it is now. He finds these kittens and he puts them in a basket, but they don't fit, so he squishes them down and kills them all. And so I really, that was the part I didn't like. So he takes them home and his mother says, "You idiot, you should have put them on your back." So the next day he goes out and he finds a donkey, so he puts it on his back. Now, the king has a daughter who never laughs. And so the king says, "Any young man who can make my daughter laugh can have half my kingdom and marry my daughter." And that was the story. So I assume what happens then is so that she's lazy Tom or foolish Tom or ignorant Tom is walking along with his donkey on his back, and she sees him and she's like, "Oh yeah, we did get to that point." So she goes, and that's when the lights went out. So they must get married, and the mother must be really pissed.
So this is a story which I can't claim to really comprehend because it's gotten sort of muddled as it was passed down from one generation to the next. It claims to have a moral purpose, which I'll get to at the end because you should never tell the moral beforehand. Anyway, it's about a young and foolish boy named Tom. Tom's mother doesn't like him because he's a dunderhead. And one day she sends him out to get some coins. And he gets the coins and he puts them in his pocket, only he has a hole in his pocket. So the coins fall out and he comes back and the coins are gone. And his mom whacks him upside the head and she's like, "You schmuck, what are you doing? You shouldn't have put them in your pocket, you should have held them in your hand." So the next day, she sends him out to get some butter. And so he takes the butter and he brings it back. He doesn't put it in his pocket because it's got a hole in it. He holds it in his hand. Of course, the butter melts. Mom's like, you doofus, what are you trying to do? I raised you to be a good boy, and here you are, you're fucking around with me. So the next day, he says, you should have, God, where should he put it? He should have held it somewhere else. He should have put it on his head, let's say. So the next day, she sends him out to get some eggs. So he gets the eggs, and he puts them on his head, and of course, the eggs roll off his head and smash on the ground. And his mother's like, "You schmuck, chazer, you're nothing but tsuris." So the next day, she sends him out to get some kittens.
Step on it.
Oh no, she says that's right. She says you should have put the eggs in the basket. So the next day she sends him out to get some kittens, and he gets the kittens, and he puts the kittens in the basket, and they won't fit in the basket, so he has to sort of scrunch them in, and of course he snaps their pretty little necks and kills them. And Mom's like, "Jesus Christ, I gave birth to you. I spent N dollars raising you up from when you were, knee-high to a grasshopper." So the next day, she says, "You should have carried the kittens on your back. That way they would have been safe." Next day, she sends him out to get a donkey. Okay, so he takes the donkey and he puts it on his back. Now, at this point, I don't know what happens. There's a sort of quick interjection here. Apparently, they live in a kingdom, and the kingdom has a king, and the king has a daughter, and the daughter is a very droll sort. She does not laugh, and the king is disappointed in this because he wants his daughter to laugh because you need to laugh to be an effective ruler, and she's going to inherit after him. So what he comes up with a contest. He says, "Whatever young man will make my daughter laugh, I'll give him half the kingdom. He can marry my daughter, and they'll live happily ever after." And so I assume the daughter was walking down the street, and she sees Tom carrying the donkey on his back, and she starts to laugh, and they get married, and they live happily ever after. And then I guess Mom is pissed because they didn't kill the trolls, which I guess comes later when they go in the forest hunting for melons. Maybe they get attacked by trolls. I don't know. And maybe Tom has this donkey on his back, and the donkey kills the troll, with a good solid kick of its foreleg. Don't ask me.
So, once upon a time, long ago, there was this beautiful girl, and she lived in this town. And everyone in this town loved this girl. I mean, she was just gorgeous. All the men wanted her. But she had 4 primary suitors, okay? There was a soldier, and this clown guy, an important nobleman in the town, and her cousin. Okay, so, she pretty much laughed at the clown. She thought he was just a bozo. So she decided, there was really no point in worrying about him. But his uncle was very important, and his uncle was her father's best friend. So she had to pay a little bit of attention to him. But anyway, he told her he loved her, and she basically laughed it off. Anyway, meanwhile, this nobleman, he sends his servant out to beat up the soldier, because he wants the girl, and he doesn't want the soldier to get the girl. So the servant beats up this soldier. The soldier gets, kind of pissed off about this and decides he's going to get revenge. But he doesn't know how. And while this is all going on in another part of town, the girl's cousin comes up to her and tells her, "Hey, look, I really love you, and I know I'm not rich or anything, and I know your father wouldn't approve, but I think we should go for it. And she says, well, yeah, I love you too, as a matter of fact. So we'll get together and we'll have wonderful sex, but we're not going to tell anybody because it's a big secret, because the town just wouldn't approve of this. So while they're getting down to business, this doctor shows up in town, and he shows up with his niece. Okay, and this is just an important thing to keep in mind. Now, while this is all going on, the clown's uncle, he writes this letter to the girl saying that it's from the clown, saying how much he really loves this girl and everything, hoping that this will win her heart. And she reads the note, and she says, well, that's very nice, but no, I'm not interested. And her father says, well, are we still friends? And the clown's uncle says, yeah, we're still friends. But what are you going to do now? You still need a husband for your daughter. The guy says, well, that's okay, because what I really wanted was for her to marry this nobleman, because he's rich. And now the girl thinks, oh, this is bad, because if I have to marry the nobleman, I'll really have to marry him, whereas the clown would be no big deal. This is really going to mess up my relationship with my cousin. So while this is going on, the clown falls in love with the doctor's niece. Okay, so when he finds out that he can't marry this beautiful girl, he says, well, that's okay, because he's going to marry the niece. Now this doctor, it turns out, is really the husband of the nobleman's ex-lover. And everybody thinks he's dead, but he's not. And he's in town because he wants to get revenge on the nobleman for screwing his wife. So he tells the soldier, who hates the nobleman anyway, he says, hey, what you should do is, if you want the girl, what you've got to do is you've got to kill this nobleman, or you'll never marry the girl. So the soldier says, well, yeah, that's a great idea. Now, what they don't know is the girl's pregnant. Okay, but that's not really important right now. So anyway, the soldier, he hides in the bushes near the church, and he's waiting for this girl to come by with her husband-to-be, this nobleman that the father has set up. And he hears this couple coming through, and he jumps out and he kills the man. But it turns out it's the clown who's actually there to marry the doctor's niece. So the doctor's kind of pissed off because he sets this up, and he ends up killing his niece's boyfriend. But they don't know what they're going to do about it, and the wedding has to take place anyway. Now, the wedding's taking place, and the cousin's there, but he's kind of mad because he can't have his cousin anymore because she's marrying this nobleman. But what nobody knows is this woman who's there as a dancer is really the nobleman's ex-lover, the doctor's wife. And she's there, and she's conjured up this plot to kill the nobleman. And so she's going to kill the nobleman with poison, and his servant is in on it, the servant that beat up the soldier. But the servant changes his mind at the last minute, poisons her, and she dies. So at this point, most people are dead, and nobody knows what they're going to do. So the girl tells everyone, oh, actually, this is what happened. I'm pregnant. And so the nobleman, her new husband, wants to know, well, who's the father? And she says, well, I can't tell you that. So he's about to beat her up, and the servant says, no, don't beat her up. I can find out who the father is. So he goes and he talks to her best friend, this other girl. And he says, well, why don't you tell me who the father is, and I'll make sure that nobody hurts you. So she tells him, but he's really tricked her. So he pokes her eyes out and throws her in this dungeon, which, that's really not nice. And then he goes and he tells the nobleman, so this is who got her pregnant. It was her cousin. So the nobleman says, well, I've got to kill the cousin. So this is what we'll do. We'll have a big party for my birthday, and we'll invite him, and we'll kill him. Now, the girl has started to have second thoughts about all this because her best friend was killed and all this, and she doesn't know what she's going to do. So she goes to the priest and says, look, I've got to stop fooling around with my cousin. So the priest goes and tells the cousin, look, you're going to stop fooling around with your cousin, with the girl, because she doesn't want it anymore. And just then, in comes the nobleman's servant and says, hey, we're having a big party and you're going to come. Now the priest figures out what's going on, and he says to the cousin, he says, this is a trick, they're going to kill you. And the cousin says, that's okay, I'm pissed, I'm going to go anyway. So he goes, and they're having this big laugh. They're like, well, why don't you go in and see your cousin, my wife? She's waiting for you, and she misses you. Why don't you just go in there? And they're thinking, when he comes back out, they'll kill him, and this is just a great trick. So he goes in there, but he's really tricked them because his girlfriend doesn't want him anymore, his cousin. So what he does is he stabs her, and he kills her. And then he goes out to the party, and the whole party's in progress, and he says, look, I killed her. And he pulls out her heart that he's cut out of her body, and he throws it on the ground. And her father has a heart attack, and while everybody's worrying about that, he stabs the nobleman and kills the nobleman. So the nobleman's servant, he grabs his gun, and he shoots him. And so almost everybody's dead. And just then the cardinal, like the town's ruler, the nuncio from the Pope, he comes in and he says, okay, so what happened here? What's going on? And the doctor says, well, I can tell you because I'm not really the doctor. Dun, dun! And he shows them who it is, and they all realize that it's all because he set this trick up at the beginning, and they're all pretty pissed, but by this time everybody's dead, and it doesn't really matter. And so that's the end of the story.
Okay,
So this is a story of the tragedy, rather, of a whole townspeople all lusting after the same beautiful woman. So there was this beautiful woman, okay, and her father wanted to see that she get married to somebody, and so he wanted her to get married to this merchant, this rich merchant, because he figured that having an alliance with a rich merchant would be good for the family, but she wasn't so sure about this. But she didn't have control over her own destiny. So there were all these men in the town who all wanted her hand in marriage very badly. First there was this clown, okay? He's this really funny clown, but he's sort of a goofy person that nobody took seriously, and she didn't take seriously either, who proposed to her, to marry her, and she said, no, she just blew him off, basically, because he's a clown. And then there was a soldier who was really hot for her, you know how those soldiers get, and he was prepared to do all these great things to win her over, win her hand in marriage, but she just said, no, I'm sorry, I don't love you, so I don't want to marry you. But then she was approached by her cousin, okay, and her cousin said, look, I know that I happen to know, because I'm your cousin, that your father really wants you to marry this merchant and wouldn't approve of me, but I really love you, and would you marry me? And she said, yeah, you know, I really love you too. Isn't that great? So let's get married. But do it secretly, because my father won't approve. So they don't exactly get married, but you know, they have a thing going, and her father doesn't know about it. So this merchant approaches her and then says that you know, he wants to marry her, and her father wants him to marry her, but she really doesn't want to marry him. So she has to think quick, and she has to do something. She has to do something about this, because she really wants to stay with her cousin. So she has this insight. Okay, if she accepts the merchant's offer of marriage, then she really has to be married to him. But she figures, and then that'll interfere with her relationship with her cousin. But if she marries the clown, you know, he's a clown, he's low maintenance, so she can just forget about him and go screw her cousin. So she says to her father, no, I tell you, I really want to marry this clown. And her father is absolutely horrified, and doesn't you know, he wants to make his daughter happy, but it's really important to him that she marry this merchant. So she goes to this priest, and she tells this priest her situation. She says, look, I'm in love with my cousin, but I know my father doesn't approve of him, and I can't marry him, and I'm just looking for some way that we can continue our love affair here, and I've resorted to offering to marry this clown who really wants to marry me, but none of it's all working out. And so the priest listens to her story, and he says, let's see, what does he say? He says he can't help her. He says he can't help her. So she says, so she lets herself get pregnant by her cousin, is what she does. And stalls this whole thing along for 9 months while these other men, or the soldier comes back, okay, and he tries to win her over. And he's really hot-headed, and he kills the clown, okay, and so now it's just between her and her cousin and the merchant, and she really doesn't want to marry the merchant. She really wants to marry her cousin, and she's pregnant by her cousin, and pretty soon it's going to become apparent. She's just stalling, hoping that people will see this, and then she'll reveal to this, and she'll have to marry her cousin, because it'd be just too scandalous for her to be pregnant by one man and married to another, because this is, you know, way back when that thing was, that was, you know, no abortion or anything like that. So the merchant decides he's got to win her over somehow, so he throws this big party, okay, and he's going to invite her cousin and a whole bunch of other people, and he's going to kill her cousin at this party, and then he'll just win her over. And so so he does that, and the cousin gets wind of this through the woman's best friend. He comes to the party, and he says, aha, I'll come anyway, and what I'll do is I'll get even somehow, I'll kill him. Well, he changes his mind. Wait. Okay, let me finish this right. I know, but it's my show, okay? All right, look. So there's this party, right? And the cousin says, I'm going to get even, okay? I'm going to get my revenge. And he comes, and it seems like he's going to kill the merchant. The girl thinks he's going to go kill the merchant so that she and her cousin can be married. But no, you know, he doesn't want her anymore, so he kills her, and he comes out, and he holds her heart in his hand. And the merchant sees this. He screams, and the girl's father sees this, and she has a heart attack. And in all the confusion, the girl's cousin kills the merchant too. And so everybody's dead except him, and he's just standing around with this girl's heart in his hand. And everybody lives very poorly ever after. And the moral of the story is just don't get too excited about women. It's just not worth it. Okay?
Once in a town, there was a very beautiful girl, and her father loved her very much, and it was time for her to become married. There also existed in the same town a merchant who had lots of money, And the father wanted his daughter to marry the merchant so that there would be a lot of money in the family. The daughter had different ideas. There were a bunch of other men in the town. In particular, there was a clown, that is to say, a bozo, who really loved her and really wanted to marry her very much. Of course, she didn't want to give him the time of day because he was a clown. Or I should say that's why he was called a clown. There was also a soldier who also loved her a lot, and he was a soldier, a rough type of guy, not very sensitive, and so she didn't like him either. The one she liked was her cousin, some guy who was, ideal. And she had this dilemma about who she was going to marry. She really felt she had to respect her father's wishes, but she really wanted to marry her cousin. She had a long affair with her cousin on the sly, and she went to a priest asking for advice about what to do, because the father was putting pressure on. Oh, the soldier left at some point also. And the priest said, "No, I don't know what to do. You're on your own. Tough rocks, lady." And so she walked away from the priest. And then it came time for a big party. The merchant was going to have a big party. Of course, she became pregnant by the cousin. And that, of course, complicated everything. She should just marry him, but the father wanted her to marry the merchant, and so she dragged things out for 9 months without resolving the issue. At some point, the merchant decided to have a party, and his plan was everybody in the town would come. Oh, did I mention that the clown died? I think so. Anyway, and the merchant would kill the cousin. The party came, but what happened was the cousin actually wasn't interested in the lady anymore, in the girl, so he just killed her. And before the merchant could kill the cousin. And the cousin cut her heart out and was walking around with it in his hand. The father saw that and was so aghast that he just died on the spot. He had a heart attack. And then there was a lot of confusion, and so the cousin killed the merchant also. And so in the end, the lady had her heart cut out. The merchant was slaughtered by the cousin also, and the father died of a heart attack. And the clown was long dead, and not the soldier. I don't know. He just stayed in the military. And so in the end, everybody lives those who are living aren't living too well ever after. He's just walking around with a heart in his hand. The moral of that story, in addition to, don't get too wrapped up in women, don't focus on one woman, before, how she feels about you and so on. Also, basically, don't kill people, that's a good prescription for happiness. And then stay away from people who might kill you. In general, don't be violent. Be passive. Relax. Nothing's that important, unless it threatens your life. You can find another woman, but it's better than being dead. Although I suppose that's not a trivial question in itself. Maybe it's better to be dead. I don't know. I don't have experience of it. This is based on a play. This is a description, a synopsis of a play, which I haven't seen. I've only heard described.
Okay. Once upon a time, there was a small town. In this town lived a very beautiful woman. The woman's father wanted her to marry the merchant. There were 3 other men in the town who liked her, and one of whom she liked. The one who loved her and who she also loved was her cousin. They had an affair on the sly for a number of years, and in the end, she ended up being impregnated by this cousin. The merchant gets sick and tired of all this waiting. He decides he wants to marry the girl, so he figures he'll throw a really big party, and then he'll invite the cousin. And he'll kill the cousin because he knows that the cousin has been having this affair on the sly. However, by the time he throws this party, but the cousin has gotten sick of this girl, so he kills the girl, and he cuts her heart out, and he walks along the street with it, and he's walking along the street, and the girl's father sees the cousin with the girl's heart and recognizes it instantly as being her heart, because you can tell, you can understand, what your daughter's heart looks like, and he dies instantly.